I believe we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome along to the Comet 25.5 release webinar for Hyperion. My name is Mason, and I'm joined today by my colleague, our Product Engineering Manager. Thanks for joining us. I'm coming to you live today. It's 8 a.m. here in New Zealand, so good morning, or good afternoon, or evening, whatever time zone you're in. To make the time zones easier, you're welcome to subscribe to notifications about when we go live. It's all on the webinar platform, and you can get a notification that shows you in your own time zone when our next presentation will be. After the webinar, we will post the recording on YouTube. So if you're watching the replay on YouTube, then hi. And if you're live with us this morning, then thanks for coming along. And as a special thank you for making the live time slot, we're doing a live question and answer session. So we'll take questions as we go. On the webinar platform, on the bottom right, there's a chat widget and a questions widget. So you can click the button to pop it open. And if you have any questions during the presentation, just write them in and I'll do my best to answer them at the end. If you're a long-time watcher of this series of technical webinars, welcome back. This is episode 33. And if you're a brand new watcher, Callum will start us off with just the essential Comet background information. Over to you, Callum.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Mason. So at Comet, we have two release tracks, the first being Voyager and the second being Quarterly. So Voyager is our latest and greatest features that we release weekly. And it's available for our self-hosted partners, and you're able to upgrade to these new features at any time. 4 times per year, we bundle all these changes into one new major quarterly release, and we release them to you guys as a stable version. It's up to you which release check you'd like to use, and we've just finished this roll-up process. And so we're very proud to have launched our latest release, 25.5.0 Hyperion. Now you'll notice that the version number is 25.5.0. The 25 means the release year, and the 5 is the release month. So we've just finished our May 2025 release. In this release, we've got 3 great new features and 9 enhancements, and its code name is Hyperion, which is a moon of Saturn. Quickly, some fun facts about Hyperion. It's shaped like a potato, and its deeply cratered surface resembles a sponge, as you can see here. But not only is it a spongy potato in space, it rotates chaotically around Saturn, tumbling unpredictably through its orbit. Enough about the moon, though. What about the great new features we have? And so the first one we're going to talk about today is safe and automatic vault unlocking. What's a storage vault first? A storage vault in Comet is the location where your backed up data is stored. Now, this could be a NAS box in your physical network. It could be our storage gateway product where you can scale storage effortlessly, or it could be an S3 cloud storage bucket. Now, multiple devices can access a storage vault, and that's where storage vaults need to be locked. Why does a storage vault get locked? Well, periodically, Comet is going to perform what we call a retention pass on the vault. A retention pass is a job that will delete data from a vault that is no longer required. So maybe it's from a snapshot from years ago that you no longer need, and you've configured rules to remove that data to optimize just the amount of storage space that your backups need. You can configure this anytime in the Comet application, and it really depends on your settings. While Comet is deleting unused data, we need to lock the vault to make sure that any device accessing the storage vault doesn't reference or use data that we're just about to delete. This makes sure we can keep your data safe while also optimizing your storage space. So when a storage vault is locked, we know that a device is running this retention pass and deleting the data that you no longer need. In rare circumstances, that device doing the retention pass can stop before it's finished doing its retention pass and removing the lock. Now, this could be for any reasons. It could be hardware failure, could be networking failure, it could be the device was a laptop and you've shut the lid. And so how do we know that the device is going to come back online and keep removing data? We can safely unlock a vault by rotating the access keys. Now, why access keys important? Access keys allow an endpoint to access the storage vault and upload or download the data. We know that if you have the keys, you can upload, download, or delete the data. So if we rotate them, which is give each endpoint that's still online the new keys and disable the old keys, we know that it's now safe This is really important because it means even if the device running the retention pass comes back online, it can't do anything anymore. It's locked out. And the power of this is because we can make it safe, we can automate it. In 25.5 Hyperion, you can now configure policies and settings within the application itself to say within 48 hours if you run into a vault locking issue, or you can set that how long Comet's going to wait before rotating the keys and handing it out to endpoints. This is a fantastic customer improvement, as you will no longer have to keep an eye on jobs, especially for jobs that shared uh, a storage vault with multiple other devices. You can now just configure a policy and know that if there's any issues, they'll be eventually resolved by Comet, which is a fantastic improvement. Over to you, Mason.
Thanks, Callum. That is fantastic. That's a huge help. Another improvement in Comet 25.5 Hyperion is an improvement to the way we manage index memory. So I'm going to start this off with a little background information. What are Comet indexes? So Comet stores your backup data using deduplication. And that means if Comet ever sees the same data being backed up twice, it only needs to be stored once. And this is a really key part of how Comet works. All of our features build on top of this. Do a backup today, do a backup tomorrow, anything that's the same, deduplicated together and only stored once. So great for space efficiency, saves you money on storage costs. In order to figure out if we've stored something already, Comet does need a list of what is stored. And there are various techniques about how Comet makes this fast and concurrent and safe. And I'm glossing over quite a lot of tricks of the trade when I say there is an index of what is stored. And that storage vault maintains the index. Comet can check out what is new data or already existing data. And so it's fine. It works great. The concept is pretty scalable. It scales based on certain factors, but on average, you could say it's in linear proportion to the size of the storage vault. So if you have a small storage vault, your index is small. If you have a multi-terabyte storage vault, your index is a bit bigger. And once you've backed up, once you've done a lot of backups and your storage vault is dozens or hundreds of terabytes, the index is probably about as big as an ordinary PC has RAM for. Comet might not have enough RAM to store the whole index. So this is not a new problem. We have lots of very large users of Comet. Um, there's one checkbox in the Comet settings to say, hey, my RAM to storage ratio is out of whack. I don't have the RAM. You click one checkbox and Comet will switch to using an on-disk database for the index. Now the database is a little bit slower than RAM, but doesn't really use any RAM. So you can do these massive backup jobs on small devices with low RAM, like consumer grade NAS boxes or whatever. So this has all been in Comet for some years now. We always thought that was pretty simple. One checkbox, good technical solution. But I've just spent the last 2 minutes explaining it, and I bet a lot of people watching this webinar didn't know about this feature. It's also a strange experience. Comet just encounters a problem and quits. So in 25.5 Hyperion, we've made it automatic. Comet detects if your RAM ratio is too low, it detects if the RAM runs out, and it automatically sets this checkbox to switch to the on-disk database mode. So Comet will just work automatically. You no longer need this big explanation. Comet will automatically use the fast RAM mode if possible, and it will fall back to the database for um, if you're a resource constrained device or if you've got a huge amount of storage on a quite small device, automatically without needing to do anything. So a really great improvement for usability and ease of use in 25.5 Hyperion. What else have we got, Callum?
We've made improvements to our job logs page. So our job logs page is the place where you can see all actively or currently running jobs, as well as historically all jobs that have ever been recorded by the management console. And we've just added new bulk actions to cancel jobs. So the first one is the cancel job bulk action. What this is going to do is you're going to be able to select jobs from the job log page, toggle the ones you want, and then click cancel job. This is going to call the device or endpoint API to stop the job, and it's similar to as you would do if you stop the job from the desktop application. Uh, this is going to try its best to stop the job. However, if it really can't be stopped, we also have a cancel job force. Now, this is useful for devices that were running a job that are no longer responding. And what it's going to do is it's going to mark the job as abandoned inside the management console. This is good because it means you can mark jobs that you think are no longer ever going to run again. But if they do start running again, maybe the device starts responding and comes back online, it's actually going to be marked as running revived. So there's going to be a few states within the application, and you're going to be able to see exactly which state your job's in, which is a great improvement. Over to you, Mason.
All right. Next up is Linux disk image improvement. So Comet supports backing up your files, applications, databases, and also the whole raw disk or partitions for complete disaster recovery. So we've had this feature for a while, and at the end of 2024, last year, we extended our disk image support to include backing up Linux devices. One important thing to know about backup technology, just sort of a terminology, is something called the consistency level. So you'll hear people talk about application consistent, crash consistent, or inconsistent backups. If your backup application is, backing up one file and then another file, you change the files while the backup's running. It means the files are backed up at different times, and sometimes that's not a problem. Sometimes it is a problem if the files are related to each other. So wherever possible, you want the next level up, crash consistent backups. And that's instantly, the files are in sync as if the PC had crashed at that exact second. And even better is what's called application consistent backups, where the application or database or something will take a moment, get its files in order, save any unsaved work, and then the files are all in sync. The application has said, yes, it's clean state for starting up again. Sometimes this is important. Sometimes it's not so important. If your laptop battery went flat right this instant and it turned off, that's not good. But for most people, you'll charge it, turn it on again. It's going to be fine. At worst, you lose a few minutes of unsaved work. It's not a business ending disaster for your laptop. For a server, though, it might be. For a file level backup, maybe you care that your files match to the instance. Maybe you don't care if they're a few minutes apart, so it's situational. However, for a disk image backup, there's no flexibility. You absolutely must, without question, be instantaneous. Any drift between the start and the end of the backup puts the file system, you could say it's file system corruption. So we really need a point in time snapshot of the disk. On Windows, there's this great built-in thing called VSS, and we get instant disk snapshots, and we can take a great high-quality disk image backup on Windows. And then it took us a few years before we added support for Linux disk image, because on Linux, there's no such built-in thing. There's LVM2 and DM snapshot, but those are not always available. There's Btrfs and ZFS snapshots, but those are file system snapshots, not block device snapshots. So there's nothing we could really rely on to get an instant point-in snapshot of your disk on Linux. Well, if there's nothing built in, we have to bring our own, which is a custom driver. So we call this driver Backup Snap, and it allows taking a snapshot of any Linux block device. Linux is open source, so the driver has to be open source. When we launched Linux Disk Image last year, we had to put in the documentation, please go and install this driver. And that's fine, but it's somewhat hidden information, so not a great out-of-the-box experience. And so in the latest Comet 25.5 Hyperion, Comet will automatically install the driver by itself. So depending on your Linux distro, the process is either 100% automated or 90% automated. You'll get a clear message in the backup job explaining the next steps. So it's really 0 clicks, self-explaining. The driver is installed automatically, and Comet will be able to start taking these high-quality disk image backups on Linux. So really just focusing on, ease of use, usability, and that first-time experience. There's another Linux disk image improvement this quarter, which is an improvement to the recovery media. So Comet supports this feature called Create Recovery Media. If you have taken a disk image backup, whether that's of a Linux machine or of a Windows machine, you've got a Comet storage vault that contains your backup job, and it comes time to restore. Normally, when restoring files in Comet, you open up Comet, click restore, follow the steps. That's all there is to it. For disk image restore, it can be a little bit more complicated because we are restoring the operating system using over the top of the operating system. And so trying to do that is like fixing an airplane while it's flying or doing surgery on yourself. It's not really realistic. So the key thing to know about restoring from a disk image backup is that you'd better reboot into the recovery environment first. So in Comet, there's a feature in the menu to create recovery media. You can create them whenever you want. and it makes an ISO or a USB drive that you can reboot and boot into this mini environment. And that gives you a safe place from which you can do your airplane fixing, do your surgery, or the operating system backup from the disk image backup. In Comet, there's two types of recovery media. I know there's four checkboxes here, but there's two main types. There's one based on Windows, Windows PE or Windows RE, and there's another one based on a mini Linux distribution. Doesn't matter which recovery media you use, they both give you the same full Comet functionality to do disk image restores. So it just boots up and you drop straight into Comet. So you can restore a Windows PC from the Linux environment or a Linux PC from the Windows environment. And until now, using that option to create the Linux recovery media required you to first install a program called Docker. Docker is very popular, but mostly it's there to give Comet a clean environment to work in while piecing together this recovery ISO or recovery USB for you. And it works great, but it was just another step that people had to do. And what's new in Comet 25.5 Hyperion is that Docker is no longer required when building the Linux recovery media from a Linux host. So there's nothing extra to install. It's no longer a requirement. So just really following on this theme from the snapshot driver, where it's just simpler, automatic, less requirements, no need to read the instructions or the docs to create this recovery media. Back to you, Callum.
Cool. Thanks, Mason. I'm loving the theme of making it easier, making it simpler for people to use. And we're going to continue that theme through our core improvements. So the first is we've added a new way to set an annual or a yearly schedule and retention options. So this is great for customers who need to have maybe a once a year snapshot at a particular date for compliance reasons, or maybe you just want to configure I really want to make sure I keep at least one copy of this every year. And so we've just made it even easier for you to configure it. Just select the new option and done. It's as easy as that. Next up, we've made improvements to Microsoft 365 protected item. You'll notice in the top right corner of the screenshot, we've highlighted this big red box of backup everything. Now this is replacing our select all except mode for selecting accounts to protect for your Microsoft 365 protected item. So this backup everything button, you click it and everything in the tenant, the Microsoft 365 tenant that is protected. So this includes when you add or remove users, the current state of the tenant will be backed up or protected by Comet. So this makes it far easier to make sure you know that if I click that button, all changes in everything will be reflected without you having to lift a finger, which is great. Now you can still protect or select individual accounts or groups for our Microsoft 365 protected item, and you can use the name picker within the big list of accounts there. But if you want to create a group where you only conditionally include people, we also can recommend to you now that you create a Microsoft 365 group inside the tenant, add the people to that group, and then just select the group inside Comet to protect. So we're giving you flexible ways to manage the accounts that you want to back up, but also make it even easier if you just want to select everyone. So it's a great improvement that we've brought. And another core improvement has been to our Windows tray icon. So the Windows system tray at the bottom of all Windows devices, you'll see the comma or however you white labeled it to icon in the bottom right. When you right click it, it has a show interface option. Now, before Hyperion, if you had the policy option, prevent opening the application interface set, you would click show interface and nothing would happen. So it kind of felt a bit odd. So now when you click it, it's going to open our login prompt dialog just to show you that the application really is there, it really is running, but the policy is preventing you from opening the application instead. So just to make it even easier to understand what Comet's doing and make sure we give the correct user experience feedback. Over to you, Mason.
Right, got it. A few more core improvements, this time on in the technology side. Let's start with faster retention passes. So Callum's mentioned this already, but retention passes are the part of Comet that cleans up old backup jobs. If you have Comet set to keep 10 days or 10 years, the new annual option, at some point we'll need to go in and delete old backup snapshots from inside your storage vault. This happens automatically as needed, but because of how storage vaults use deduplication to store only one copy of each unique piece of data, The retention processing happens in sort of two phases. Phase one, you find what data is referenced or unreferenced, and then phase two, delete anything that's unreferenced. So it's a bit more complicated than that. But in Comet 25.5 Hyperion, we have spotted some ways to improve that phase two deletion speed in a pretty significant way. The effect depends on the exact type of storage. For S3 compatible storage, including Wasabi, AWS, Impossible Cloud, and our own Comet storage, we expect more than 10 times faster. For Backblaze B2, storage satellites, SFTP, and WebDAV storage, approximately 6 times faster. And for local disk paths, no effect, they were already running at maximum efficiency. This improvement is available now and happens automatically. Because this improvement is only about how fast Comet can delete things, you will get a little improvement every day, all the time, but the improvement will be more noticeable if the retention pass has found a large amount of data to delete. So you'll see more speed up, for example, if you have very large storage vaults where the data is changing quite a lot with every backup, or if you're deleting specific old snapshots from the vault, if you used to have a long retention policy, shrinking it to a short retention policy, things like that. Another really interesting technology improvement this quarter is related to change block tracking for VMware. And just to set the scene, Comet supports backing up many different types of applications, databases, and virtual machine hypervisors, including VMware. So our VMware protected item type, by default, will use CBT, change block tracking. And that's a technology where VMware knows what parts of the VM have changed and it can tell Comet directly. Now, Comet uses deduplication no matter what. So even if we do a large backup on the VMware side, any parts that have not changed will still not require any extra storage space in your storage vault. So CBT does not, in Comet, it does not reduce your storage size. It only makes the backup faster because Comet doesn't have to scan the whole disk. It can be faster. It's weird, but sometimes it can be slower. In the cases where Comet has to jump here and there from one change to the next, there's a certain overhead in that. VMware will tell us, oh, this part's changed and this part's changed, and we have to go there and go there. And following that request back and forth has a certain overhead. And it turns out, compared to just reading the whole VM start to finish, there's no jumping around, just trucking along. And between those two sort of concepts, there's a crossover inflection point where it's not worth following all these jumps. It's preferable to just disable CBT and read the whole disk. We've done some testing and we've figured out roughly where that point is. And so now in Comet, if we cross the threshold, we will automatically switch to the simple mode. And this makes the backup job faster, just automatically. It's simply a win. Um, the data will still be deduplicated. This doesn't affect your storage costs. It's just a little bit faster VMware backups for everyone in Comet 25.5 Hyperion.
Oh, how good, another automatic feature.
Hmm.
Cool. Next up, we have translations. So Comet is available in 15 languages, and you're able to choose your language within our management console or desktop app at any time. And you can see here, that's our management console with the language picker. And we've just refreshed them for 25.5 Hyperion. You can change your language at any time, switch between them, whichever you prefer. And, you can help us with our translations. If you spot a typo, if you want to add or request us to add another language, please check out our GitHub repo where we list all of our translations, how they're translated, and you can jump in at any time to help us out, which would be great. And for a sneak peek of what's coming soon, we're really excited to talk about our Proxmox protected item. Hey! So Proxmox has been a highly upvoted feature request on our feature voting system, and we have been hard at work at it all year. So to give a teaser about what it's going to contain or be launched with, it's going to be very similar to our Hyper-V or VMware protected items if you're familiar with those. So it's going to come with great features like changed block tracking support, meaning we can do fast incremental backups of VMs. It's going to have Hyper-V to Proxmox, backup to restore flows, Proxmox to Hyper-V restore flows, sort of any to any VM hypervisor to VM hypervisor, which we already support for Hyper-V and VMware. You're also going to be able to do great things like a disk image backup from a physical endpoint and restore it to your Proxmox hypervisor. So a lot of great features, a lot of flexibility, and we are really, really excited to be able to launch this soon. Uh, Within the next month or so, we're going to be starting our beta program, so keep an eye out on the feature voting system, and we'll probably also send out marketing emails or teasers to see if you're interested in joining our beta program.
Fantastic. That's really exciting. I think that is all we have for today. Does anyone have any questions? Feel free to pop them in the questions widget if you haven't already. I can see a few questions in there already. Just to refresh your memory, Callum and I talked about the new features and enhancements in Comet 25.5 Hyperion, including the automatic safe vault unlocking, so your devices just run backup jobs more smoothly. Automatic index memory management, so we automatically switch that on disk mode where necessary. The new bulk actions for managing and cancelling backup jobs remotely from the Comet management console. Linux disk image now does the snapshot driver automatically. The Linux recovery environment no longer needs extra installs. We've got the new annual schedule and retention options. Microsoft 365 backups are simpler and easier to configure. Retention passes are faster. VMware jobs are faster. Translations are all up to date. And our big news about Proxmox coming soon. So actually quite a lot has happened this quarter. Really all with that theme of just making Comet simpler and easier and just works. A question here, curious if your roadmap is publicly listed. We don't publicly list our entire roadmap. However, we take our feature voting page pretty seriously. And if you look at what's the top voted feature requests on there, you can get a rough understanding of, the feature voting page. The upvotes there are not the only thing we base our priorities on, but they are an important part of it. And that's your best public option at the moment. Another question here, side question on vaults. Specific to Wasabi, how does Comet handle vaults that are immutable in regards to retention passes? Can the software run retention passes if the bucket is immutable? No, we can't run retention passes if the bucket is immutable because in Comet, there's obviously quite a lot of storage. Say a storage vault is a terabyte. 99.99% of that is going to be your backup data. And then a certain amount of it is metadata that Comet does actually need to change and update lock files, index files, snapshot files. And a retention pass does really need to delete data. Every file that Comet uploads to a storage vault is itself immutable. We never modify a file after it's written to a storage vault. And that's why you'll see if you look inside a storage vault directory, all the files have strange hash names. Those file names are the SHA-256 hash of that file's content. So that's useful from an integrity checking point of view. You can check the hash of every file. But if the bucket itself is immutable, Comet can't delete things that it needs to delete just for day-to-day operations. So instead of using the bucket immutable option, if you want that sort of high security, no deletion, air gap, anti-ransomware concept, instead of using the bucket immutable option, please use the object lock option. The object lock option will mean individual data files can be marked as, can't delete this, ransomware can never delete this. But at the same time, Comet will know not to mark everything as object lock, just the bulk of the data, and that means we can safely do retention passes while still getting that security guarantee. I hope that answered your question. Another question here, would it be feasible to create a Pixie bootable Comet backup image? That way all apps are closed, firewalls, anti-malware doesn't interfere. Naturally, disk encryption would be an obstacle there. That's a really interesting concept. You're welcome to try it out. If you can Pixie boot an ISO file, I'm pretty sure you can, then you should be able to Pixie boot the Windows-based one. And regarding disk encryption, it really depends on what drivers are present inside the recovery media. The reason, Comet has the recovery media generator inside the endpoint agent rather than inside the server is partly for legal reasons around redistribution, and it's also partly so that we can pick up drivers from the current PC. And so for things like Wi-Fi hardware, networking hardware, that's particularly interesting. But in terms of disk encryption, um, I I can come back to you on this one. I'm pretty sure that works in the Windows recovery environment. Another question here. Will retention locking be improved to prevent retention from commencing if there are active backups running on other endpoints accessing the same vault? Um, we've we've simplified things for the discussion. It does work like that, and in fact, it's quite a lot more complicated than that. The locking system is concurrent. There's 5 different types of locks that we can have concurrent retention passes and backup passes. Um, it's a pretty significant innovation in Comet to allow concurrency, but only bounded concurrency within a generational system. So we have a generational collector. Is there any way to prevent a job from reviving after marking it as abandoned? That's a really interesting question. And unfortunately, I think it's a misunderstanding of what the job is. When there's the device running, and in Comet, we encourage people to have the backup agent, the endpoint device, back up directly to the storage vault. And it's sort of working independently. It's talking to the storage vault independently. And maybe it's working, maybe it's encountered an error, but the endpoint agent is doing the work of doing the backup. And then the management console, your Comet server management console, is sitting over here and it's receiving job log information from the client. But it's a disconnected network system. And if you have a network split between the client and the management console, then the management console no longer has any idea what the endpoint agent is doing. And the endpoint agent could be still backing up if it's just your management console that's lost network connection, for instance, or if the endpoint agent has lost internet connection, but it still has local access to a storage vault. You're in a situation where the job what you see as the job status is the Comet Management Console's perspective of the last thing that the client told it. So when you cancel a job normally, it's sending a request to the client to say, hey, please stop what you're doing. The job will stop and clean itself up and say, yes, I've stopped. The cancel job force is sort of, in a best case, we'll be able to do that. But if there is no network connection between the client and the management console, all we can really do is say, we don't know what's going on with this job. The client has not checked in, it hasn't told us, and we can say abandoned. If the client then comes back online and it says, oh, by the way, I'm up to 80% of this job now, or 85%, what are you going to do with that information? You have to, the job clearly didn't cancel just because you closed it off on the management console because the connection was gone. And so in that case, the job comes back as say, oh, I guess it actually was still running and it's been revived from this abandoned state. Now, this normally doesn't happen. Normally, your internet connection's fine, the connection's fine, jobs finish, and everything generally works. We're talking about an edge case inside an edge case. This is the sort of thing that you might occasionally see, especially if you have a large partner base, a lot of laptops, intermittent internet connections. But no, there's no way to prevent a job from reviving after marking it as abandoned. Another question here. Great to hear that Proxmox is coming soon. Is there a way to sign up to get information about Proxmox? What's the best way to stay updated? Feel free to contact us in any way. We'll make sure you stay in the loop. But the best thing is if you could go to our feature voting system, find the Proxmox feature voting request. You should find it easily. It's one of the top most feature requests at the moment, and just upvote that feature request from your Common account. And that's really a great way to stay informed of any changes that happen in the area. You'll get an email notification when there's a status update, and we'll be able to track who's interested in that and for when we send out beta invitations shortly. One more question. That's it. That's it exactly. Intermittent connections. That's what your current. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you understood. Yeah, thank you for your kind words. I think that's all the questions we have time for today, but we still want to hear from you. If you have any questions at all, we're always happy to help out. We're more than happy to hear your questions by ticket through the usual ticket system in the Comet account portal, or you can email us hello@cometbackup.com, or we do support phone calls. So our company is based in New Zealand. We do have round the clock level 1 technical support, but if you want a sales call or if you want any more advanced technical support or troubleshooting, use the booking widgets and that can figure out a good time that suits both of us. We're more than happy to jump on a call, and often that's a very quick way of clearing the air and getting answers to any questions you might have.
Cool. Well, thank you for joining us on today's webinar, and it's great to get the questions in as we always do. And so we will see you on the next time for our next quarterly release, which will be in August this year. So please feel free to subscribe ahead of time on our webinar links and keep watching our blog as we'll post all latest updates and any sort of new and exciting features there as well. So a lot of ways to stay engaged with our content, and we'll see you again shortly.
Fantastic. Thanks, everyone.